My name's Scott Barretta, and I'm from Oxford, Mississippi. I work with a lot of different blues projects. I was the Oxford, Mississippi. Yeah, I was the editor of Living Blues magazine, which is published up there at the University of Mississippi in Oxford. Host a radio show on Mississippi Public Broadcasting on Highway 61, and currently work with something called the Mississippi Blues Trail. We've put up a series of now 143 historic markers since 2006, and we're saluting mostly people that are from Mississippi, so when we start a Texas trail.
All right.
But I'm glad to be back. This is the second year we've done the oral histories, and it's being recorded for posterity. And I think a really great thing, this is something that's done at the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival as well, so also having sort of a folklore component where you get to hear the artists talk about their career and thoughts on various things, and you get to ask some questions at the end. It's a real pleasure for me to have Mel Waiters here today.
All right, thank you.
I don't think he remembered me talking to him on the phone a couple years ago. It resulted in this. I did a cover story for Living Blues magazine called "Southern Soul King," and I guess that's about as good a way of you don't oppose that title, do you?
No, I don't. It sort of pays Jim AC and Chase Bank and everyone else I owe.
Well, but as the Southern Soul King, Mel Waiters, for those of you all know him, has a number of really great hits since I think the late '90s is really when you broke out. Is that right?
Yeah, very late. Yeah.
Very late '90s with "Hit It and Quit It," and then we just talked a minute ago to the audience about some of the hits. "Hole in the Wall," most notably. I guess that's really the song you're most famous for, except for your latest hit.
Yeah, well, "When You Get Drunk" is the latest. One of the other very popular songs for me is "Got My Whiskey."
Got My Whiskey.
It didn't sell the units that "Hole in the Wall" did, but it's a very popular song that I do each night that I must do.
But one thing I can say about "Hole in the Wall" is that it's not just your song, but it has become, like Down Home Blues, a standard in the blues that I know often in the Southern Soul circuit, other artists will cover songs, but also I see in Mississippi and go into various bars around the state that a lot of bands, you sort of have to do "Hole in the Wall" now. It's become a sort of a, it's not necessarily a Mississippi song, though, as you said. We still have a lot of holes in the wall. We got a lot of holes in everything in Mississippi, actually. But anyways, and your latest CD is "Say What's on Your Mind." Is that your label, Brittany?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I want to talk about that in a minute. But what's the big hit off of that now? What's playing on the radio off of that record?
"When You Get Drunk." You say what's on your mind. Yeah.
Okay.
So we all have relatives that pretty much at the family reunion at about 6:30 or 7, after a couple of those shots of whatever, someone stands up and probably says, "Well, I got something I've been wanting to tell you for quite some time now."
Oh, Lord.
And but growing up in like I have in that environment and loving my family, and we all have families, and we have uncles and aunties that kind of speak their mind, and that's why in one sector of the songs it says, "A drunk will speak a sober mind," so they'll pretty much tell you how they feel.
Well, you know your audience very well. You know about. I mean, I don't know whether you indulge in that much yourself if you drink a lot, but I know that
I don't drink actually.
You don't drink, but you're singing to people who are going out on Saturday nights, Friday nights.
Yes.
So you're singing to something that a lot of your audience members know about personally, or or know about that relative that gets a little bit too drunk.
Well, you really don't have to drink to meet that person, but see, I grew up in radio, and I did about 10, 11 years of radio, and in radio, I played various clubs, and the clubs that I played, was the kind of clubs that they were hole in the walls, clubs that you would go in the ladies' or men's room. It may not be tissue in there, and later on they started making bathrooms and restrooms where you can wash your hands, and but it wasn't always there, It got a little bit better sanitized as you went on. But back in the day, when I was DJing and working clubs, it was pretty much like hole in the walls to where, one night I performed in I think it's Roberta, Georgia, or something like that. And we got there, and the lady came in, and they were frying wings and everything. And she says, "You guys are this is your dressing room." And it was like a Venetian blind or something with hooks, and on one side was my dressing room, and the other side was the men's room. So it's a real sobering thing, and it keeps you deeply rooted and keeps you pretty focused on what you're doing and what you come from. And I really enjoy it. Every once in a while, I get to play events like today that you can get there, and the sound is already set up, and meal tickets, and they got food, may have transportation to and from the venue. And there's gigs that I still do. When I get there, I have to find a parking place. And if I have to change, I may change in the van, and I may change in the men's room. A few weeks ago, they had in South Carolina, was it South Carolina? It was South Carolina, where they had to actually close off the men's room so I could use the men's room, which was very kind of them. And this was in the home of the guy. His name is Radio. They made a movie behind him. One of my favorite movies. It was called, what was it? Radio. Where's Radio from? It is Radio, but the hometown was Anderson, South Carolina. And they closed off the men's room, and I was able to go in and use the men's room. So I get the best of both worlds. In about 3 months, I will tour, and I'll stay in 5 stars. And maybe next week I'll be in a half a star.
Right. Well, that's the way it was, I mean, for B.B. King and everybody going back on the blues circuit.
Absolutely.
Back to the 50s, when you would maybe play the Apollo Theater 1 week, and the next week you'd be out in the
Highway 61.
Highway 61 out in the middle, and that was what it took, really, back in the day
Right.
to work, as B.B. did, 350 days a year. I think nowadays most people aren't doing. You work mostly on the longer weekends now, is that right? Or
Yeah, well, pretty much. I pretty much work every weekend.
and I mean that you don't work through the week, but usually mostly work weekends. Is that correct?
Right, mostly weekends. Right.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if there's work during the week, I will work.
Yeah.
I'm in the market. I have a daughter that really don't understand what the procedure is with money on credit cards. So you know how it is. She thinks you're just supposed to just hand it to people, and it's money automatically there because her father's MEL Waiters. But
Man.
we all.
Well, that's a dilemma people enter in all sorts of businesses, I guess. Well, I just wanted to talk, before I get around to some of your noted recordings, I want to talk a bit about your background. So I remember I interviewed you, went back and looked at the interview, and you were born in San Antonio. Are you
Born
still
and
in
raised.
you still in
Still
Texas?
there, yeah. Born and raised San Antonio. San Antonio Spurs that were probably beat real bad by New Orleans. Don't go there.
Is San Antonio a good Southern soul or blues town?
No.
No.
We Tejano and mariachi. And
Right.
As a matter of fact, my first radio job was at a Tejano station, La Teca Nita Jalapeno Radio. And I can't really speak it, but it was my first job, and I had to fake it. And at $69 a week, I went for it. So
You were DJing, playing like
I
those
was
kind of
playing Hispanic music. And,
Wow.
Yeah, and I went for it, Angelita by Joe Jama, and I just did what I had to do, and then eventually I crossed over into black music. So.
Now, but you were raised by your grandparents, and you had a lot of really great things to say about them in the
yeah.
interview, about the values
Right.
they passed on. You can talk a little bit about that? And how
Yes,
that maybe
yes.
affected your career?
Oh, not only my career, but my life. My grandmother, and my grandfather, my dad's mom and dad. As a matter of fact, when I was born, my grandmother picked me, came to the hospital, and my mom had 9 kids, and I was number 10, and she told my grandmother, which was her mother-in-law, that she just had too many kids, and she just couldn't take any more kids home, because I don't know what her and my dad had in mind, but I was so glad the dumpster wasn't an option for me. And my grandmother picked me up from the hospital and took me home, and I was blessed to have her for 99 years until 3 years ago. And she just instilled in me, Jesus. And I don't care what I do and where I travel and where I play, Jesus always comes into play, and he just watches over me. It was a real funny thing. We flew to San Diego with Roger Neighbors and the Blues Cruise about, I think it was last year. Was it last year, Miss Calloway? About 2 years? Okay. Well, this runs together for me. But anyway, we were on the plane, and I was listening to they had the intercom system or something, and one of the stewardess say, "Oh yes, a hurricane coming, a Hurricane Rick," and they said it's over in the Pacific. And when we landed, I said, "Where are we sailing to?" "Oh, we're going out of the Pacific." And I said, "Okay." And then finally they said they were going to reroute the sail to another area. But at that particular time, I spent a lot of times talking to my grandmother out there in the middle of that blue ocean with Hurricane Rick coming our way. So she was just great, and you with a grandmother like that, it was so many values that she gave me that I can use in all aspects of my business. And it's really, really, really paying off.
And you also noted that they encouraged you in music, and I think got you your first instrument, which a lot of people are probably surprised what that is. Right?
Absolutely. I got my first set of drums at 7 years old, and it was called a Big Daddy trap drum set, and had the little guy on the front, his picture and everything, and her and my granddad set him up at about 7, and boy, I went to work. And by noon, Christmas morning, they were back in the box. I made so much noise, but I gained so much from that, because even at that time and point, I can remember my grandmother had this box that she had like large spools of thread that I don't even know they make them anymore. But I would take her spools of thread and put around the drum. You have these springs that that you tighten and tune the drums. But I would put spools of thread around around the drums to tune the drums. And I had the greatest drum set, but that was a Christmas gift that I'll never forget.
Well, they moved you out to the clubhouse or the garage out back, is that right?
The garage. Oh boy, great moments in the garage. I would sit in there as I got older, and I had an album called The OJ's Live in London, and I would play this entire live performance on drums from beginning to end. And I learned a lot of techniques from that, and a lot of James Brown, Cold Sweat, and got the feeling, and Papa's got a brand new band. So
you noted Buddy Miles as well as an inspiration.
Oh yeah. Buddy with the big afro and sitting on those drums and beating, and also when I was in the band in San Antonio growing up, I was a vocalist as well as I would have the boom. I was the lead vocalist and play at the same time. So that was a technique that I picked up on and enjoyed.
I think you actually mentioned Phil Collins. I was a bit surprised. Of course, remember Phil Collins with the microphone.
Oh, yeah. Phil was phenomenal as well, still is. So I had a wide, range of music and different people that I really, really admired in the business. One of my favorite songs is by Elton John, which is the song, the love, I think it's called A Song for You or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And you also pointed out that you grew up in a neighborhood where you could have gotten in trouble, but you noted that the drums kept you out of trouble, aside from your grandparents too, but that really occupied you and kept you out of messing around?
Well, actually, I had older brothers that would come by and, during the summer, more than myself would stay with my grandmother. And they chose to do other things, but I just chose to pack the drumsticks because I really love drums. And, you know, you can remember back when somebody's doing something they don't have no business in there. Come on, Mel, you just scared, you know, but I really didn't have anything on my mind other than drums, because even my senior year in high school, I would walk around and I was known for carrying, you know, the drumsticks in my rear pocket. I wasn't a football player and I wasn't real popular with the girls, but after my career took off, I went back and saw a few of them that used to walk past me.
You can ignore them now, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right. But now you said by the time you were 18, but you started playing with the Godson Brothers. That was your first band when you were like 13 or something like that?
Yes, and their parents was our chaperone, that is. And we would play at the military base. It was called the Teen Canteen Club in San Antonio at Fort Sam. And we went to Del Rio and Kingsville, Texas, a lot of the military bases. But it was the first time that I was able to I was told that anytime you receive money, you're professional. And I got $125 for each night. And back then, in the 70s, early 70s, man, $125 was a lot of money. And I was really excited.
Yeah, there's a lot of good musicians playing in New Orleans that aren't taking home 125 in 2011.
Oh, boy.
Right.
Sure?
Well, that's, you know, it's a town where there's a lot of clubs and a lot of musicians, so it becomes difficult, yeah. But, so you played with them, and I think you left playing with the group when you got into radio, is that right?
Right. I went to radio school. It was called Elkins Broadcasting School, and I actually went to Elkins to get my third-class license with endorsement 9, which was a requirement for radio then to have license, which I think they should not have done away with. But anyway, I ended up getting my second class and ended up working radio for about 9-10 years.
What was the effect on that later, on becoming a musician later on? What lessons do you think you learned from radio in terms of learning to please the audience or anything general like that?
Absolutely. Knowing, after being in radio, I would hear so many different brands. Today it's called a brand. But back then a brand was when you hear Gamble and Huff production, you knew it was Teddy, you knew it was the 3 Degrees, you knew it was Billy Paul. Then if you would hear the Spinners, you knew it was Tom Bell. You hear the Shylights, you knew it was Eugene Records. So the brand then was something that I heard that today that's no longer there. You really don't know what's on the radio anymore today. But it helped me in a way of watching Earth, Wind, and Fire. I mean, you know, Mike, the Jacksons. I mean, these people would come on stage and their attire would be very coordinated, you know. And with my performances and my shows, I take a great deal of time of making sure my band's attire is good and mine as well, because I really admired the way Johnny Taylor and Tyrone Davis would look real sleek on stage. And I liked that. It just had a certain touch. I just don't think if anyone spend anywhere from $45 to $50 to go and see their favorite artist, that they really want to see him in a prom shirt or band lawn that probably someone on the first row would have on.
Right. Did you, I mean, a lot of DJs often serve as MC, so did you start to get out in front of the public in that way?
Yeah, in radio, I interviewed quite a few guys, and it's real strange because I would play Shirley Brown's music, I would play Bobby Womack, people that I perform with now, Buddy Ace, and just, as a matter of fact, the Buddy Ace story for me is real dear, because one of my first singles, was called Hit It and Quit It. Right. I recorded that for Buddy Ace and presented it to him, and Leon Haywood didn't like the digital drums, so he wanted to put the acoustic live drums on it, and Buddy liked the record, but he passed away that following Christmas, so he didn't get a chance to record it. But when I came out when I came out, I presented that particular song to Dave Perkins, and Dave Perkins introduced me to a very well-known DJ by the name of E. Rodney Jones, that came from Chicago, that ended up living in Baton Rouge. And we gave it to gave the record to E. Rodney, and Rodney said, "Oh, this a hit record here. I ain't gonna have no problem with this one." And E. Rodney began to play it. But when I came out, I wanted to be Teddy Pendergrass. And after Hit It and Quit It made such an impact in the South, I went from wanting to be Teddy Pendergrass. I got my first deposit from Roger Redding. So I played Greenwood, Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And I think I got about $12.50 in the mail, and I didn't know you got a deposit before you go out. This was new to me. So I went from wanting to be Teddy Pendergrass to wanting to be Buddy Ace. So that changed me real fast. But learning and seeing how the business was going then was the thing that changed me from wanting to be an R&B artist. But it's evolving in a real big circle right now, because the music that I record is really not blues. The closest that I really came to blues with my recordings, I would say, is Hole in the Wall.
Right.
My lyrics are blues related, but my music production
Right.
is a little bit more R&B.
But it's interesting, though, that even though I guess a lot of artists performing, you call it Southern Soul, or do you have a term for the genre that you perform in, R&B? I don't know.
We were saying Southern Soul for quite some time, but now I'm calling myself an R&B artist because of the production that I use. I mean, I have a song called "Smaller the Club, the Bigger the Party." That's R&B production, and in this city, I get a better response with that song than I do with Hole in the Wall.
Right.
And it's not that they don't like Hole in the Wall, but if I come here and don't sing "Smaller the Club, the Bigger the Party," it's like a real insult.
Right.
And
Is that right?
I didn't, and I didn't know that until I came here a few times, and I'm like, oh boy, I sung that too early. So I kind of pushed it down in my show a little bit further, because it had that kind of energy here in this market.
Now, you had cut records already, what, a decade before? When did you cut a 45 called "Do the Airplane"?
Boy.
We're going back, man.
Oh boy, we're going back. Yes, we are.
Well, but I think when you were talking about the record you did, "Hit It and Quit It," that was late 97, 96, 97?
That was 95.
95, okay. But when did you cut that first single, by the way?
Airplane was like in 78, 77, and I had quite a few of them still stacked in my grandmother's garage right before she passed away. I never sold very many, but a lot of my friends in San Antonio, when they see me now, they say, "Hey, man, are you going to sing the Airplane tonight?" I said, "Get away from me," because nobody bought it. It's a real joke, but it was a song that I would act like I had wings. Everybody do the airplane, but
Sorry to bring you. You're going to be hearing people yelling from the audience.
And that's weird from a guy like myself that hates to fly. I would give an airplane ticket away. I really don't like to fly, but I only fly when I have to.
Now, but you produced "Hit It and Quit It." I think at some point you had gone from playing drums and then working as a DJ on the radio and then in clubs as well. But I think you told me you bought a sequencer and started playing with a sequencer.
Yeah, I moved to Beaumont, Texas, and began working radio at a station called Kalo 99. And they had just come out with, Roland had just come out with a new synthesizer called Roland Juno 1. And if you guys are familiar with the term layaway,
this was not a cheap instrument.
No, it was a bit much. $1,200 then was a lot of money. So I put in a layaway, and I paid on it for several months. And finally, I got it out of layaway, and I brought it home. And my buddy that was the program director at the station was my roommate. And I was in the living room, and I would be in there just bing, 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 dun, 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 dun. And that's how it all began. I couldn't read. I still don't read music. I have a set of ears that, that kind of work for me, and I can hear it and then I can play it.
Can you explain to the audience maybe can you explain what a sequencer is? I don't know if everyone knows what that is.
A sequencer is a keyboard that, like the technology is today. You can have up as many sequence tracks as you want, but back then this was an 8-track sequencer, which you could play the bass, boom, boom, boom on one line. The next line you can play a string, ding, 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 and then the next line you can play the piano. Next line you can do a horn line, and the next line you can play a drum line, and then hit play, and all of these things are played at one time. And then after you create that one sequence, you can copy and paste it, or you can create a new sequence. And when you put it into what we call a song mode, when you hit play on it, it'll play those different modes that you want it to. And at that particular time, it just sort of began to kind of move away from, kind of take place of a lot of musicians.
Right, like Malaco Records, which you recorded for many years. They had Muscle Shoals sounds for a while, and we're cutting like Bobby Bland and Milton up there. And you must know Harrison Calloway and Jackson.
Very well.
Very well.
Yes.
Harrison Calloway was a trumpet player with Muscle Shoals, and now in Jackson, often tracks are made by Harrison Calloway for a lot of different artists, right? Then I guess they go in and replace things that he put on the sequencer later. Right?
Actually, Hole in the Wall is a demo. And it was a demo. I cut it for a guy. I invited him down, and he said, Mel, give me one of your songs. So I invited him down. We cut the song. I left him in the room, and I came back in. He said, man, I don't really feel it. So I sung Hole in the Wall one time, one take. And if you would turn the project up today, it's only me on Hole in the Wall. And it's not like a background. It's not like a big production. So I took it to Malaco. They loved it. And I created an album from it. But what they wanted to do at Malaco was they wanted to go and make a bigger production of it. So what we did was we took a drive to Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and we got the big horn section, and all the great guitarists would come in, and we reproduced Hole in the Wall. Well, by 3 weeks into Hole in the Wall, it didn't have the same feeling that I got out of my house. So we ended up using my demo. So the world is using my demo. So Tommy Jr. says, I can't believe this. We got $1 million facility, and all he has was one keyboard, and we can't do that. So that went on for about 3 weeks, and finally we settled with the demo. So when you hear Hole in the Wall and you hear me say, when I go around the first time and I said, got a lot of yada, I fumbled the words. And I was trying to say got a lot of, and I said got a lot of yada. And so we never went back and corrected it. But Hole in the Wall is a demo out of my house. And from that point on, I've been cutting in my house, and all of my music that I brought to Malaco, I cut in my own studio, which was a real blessing.
Right. So that was 99, and I think you signed with Malaco at 97, is that right?
Yeah, I signed with him in 97 on a Monday with a brown van with the side bin in that my sister sold to me for $750, that it took one guy to lift the door and someone else to pull it and close it. And it had the carpet inside that was extremely hot. The compressor was out. And by the time we got to Jackson, and Tommy Jr. said, you gonna come by today? I said, we're on the way. And I had one copy of Woman in Need, which was the album that contained Got My Whiskey. And he said, are you gonna leave this with me? He says, we're interested in you today. I said, to do what? He said, we want to sign you. I was broke. Everywhere I sung that weekend, nobody had my money. I sung for free. Eufaula, Alabama, and a couple of more locations where people were calling me Mel Waters. And they thought I was a stripper when I first came out on the circuit. They thought Mel Waters was a stripper. So And today, it's real weird. But anyway, Tommy signed me that Monday. They gave me a check, probably at that time, $10,000. I mean, to get $10,000 at 3:30 on a Monday and you're broke, you're rich automatically.
Now, what did you drive back to San Antonio?
I drove back a brand new 15-passenger van. They bought me a van, and I had a new 15-passenger van, and I had the title. And I didn't know what that was because I've never had a vehicle where you get the title. Long enough to get the title, but that particular vehicle, I had the title. I said, oh, that's what this looks like. So they gave me the title in Crystal Springs, Mississippi, and I called my grandmother. I say, Mama. She say, what, Melvin? I say, I just signed with Malaco Records. She say, that's good, baby. I say, I'm on the way home. I got a van. She said, well, where you get a van from? She said, I said, Mama, they bought me a van too. So I got home, I had a brand new van and $10,000, and the record was out for about 6 months. The guy at the pressing plant in San Antonio only gave me one copy because I couldn't afford to pick up the entire project. So he gave me the one copy, and I gave Tommy Jr. the one copy. They signed me, and they called back in San Antonio and gave him their credit card. And they paid for the remaining 2,400 pieces. And the album was out for 6 months, and they were playing Woman in Need until one afternoon, Magic 102 in Houston, a young lady by the name of Candy Eastman, played Got My Whiskey. And they have something what they call a double play. And she played it back to back, played it twice, and my life changed. Because my relatives began to call me. They say, Melvin, man, they playing your record on Magic 102. And Magic 102 is like this big FM in Houston. And Malaco, so they really brags about this, and I was excited too. But they moved 50,000 records just in Houston alone on Got My Whiskey on that particular album. And from that point on, the excitement began to grow about my career. So when I cut Hole in the Wall and took it to Magic 102 in Houston, Carl Connors, the program director, we got in the van with him, myself and Malaco's promotional man, Noble Wumble. And I was sitting in the back seat, Noble and Carl was up front, and Carl put Hole in the Wall in his disc player, and his dun-dun-dun-dun, and Carl say, well, I'm going to start playing it tomorrow. And I said, well, the album's not finished. He said, that's y'all's problem. So Magic 102 began playing Hole in the Wall the next day. I had Hole in the Wall and Got My Whiskey in hot rotation on a major radio station, and my life changed. Just instantly. Mm-hmm. People were calling and booking me. I worked so much. Roger had me working so much. I was working weekdays, and everyone was naming their clubs the Hole in the Wall, and it got so bad, there were nights to where I worked so when the horn section would take a solo, I'd go in the corner behind the curtains and just sleep in between songs and come back out and finish the show.
Who is Roger you're referring to?
Roger Reddings, which is out front now. That's Otis Reddings' brother. He has a booking agency, and Roger has booked me, from that point on. And
he books an awful lot of artists on the southern
yes,
side. Yeah.
Yes, and he has been a real blessing to me. He's kept me working, and because this last spell, I went 4 years, something totally unheard of, and I worked continuously 4 years before Malaco put a record out on me. And I was with them for 13 years, and this past April was my final weekend with them.
I Ain't Gonna Do It was the last one. I Ain't Gonna Do It was the last record you did?
That was the last record that I did with them.
Right. And you did, 6 CDs altogether? I know they had also a greatest hits kind of a thing as well. Is that right?
No telling what they have, but I did 6 records.
6 records, yeah.
They have enough in the can to do something else,
right.
Probably. You know how that goes. But my new label is named after my daughter, Brittany. So hopefully I'll use her name, and maybe I can get some of my money back from her. But she's gone. She's graduated from college, and no signs of leaving my residence. But I don't know how that really works anymore, but that's my baby. She's great. And
Somebody's got to take care of the house on the weekends, right?
she does a good job of that. Make sure there's enough washing liquid, washing powder. That's the most exciting thing with her. I don't know what it is with kids where they have to wash every day. I don't really get that part, but she likes the new washer and dryer, so she frequents that room quite a bit. So.
Now, I was just looking on your website, and I noticed there's some other productions on Brittany. Now, has Brittany been a production facility for a while, or when did you start using that name as your company, or was it earlier a name of a studio or something like that?
It was. I've had that name for since the late '80s.
Okay.
And when I started recording vinyl, I had that name, and I would always use it, And then I had to go and get the C of O with the city, and I've had that brand for a minute now.
Now, you've got records out on other artists. Have you produced other artists for that label?
Yes. Chandra Calloway, she has, which is my background singer, and she's works the website and everything. She has a great album, and we just finished doing a project on her, which she redid Millie Jackson's single called "Ask Me What You Want." I'll try my best to get it. She did a great job on that. I produced Lattimore's, produced a CD on Lattimore on that label, on my label.
Right, okay, I remember that.
And when I first got to Malaco, I produced an album on Ernie Johnson, and that was real fun.
Who's based in Texas, is that right?
Yes.
Dallas,
yeah.
is he?
Dallas.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so, and I've worked with quite a few.
What is Hog Pen?
Hog Pen was some kids out of Alabama that we met at the Pizza Hut a couple of years ago. Was it last year or year before last? Year before last. Boy, this time is flying. Year before last, and they had the cinnamon sticks, which I enjoyed at Pizza Hut, too much of them. Anyway, this guy was in the back working. He worked at Pizza Hut. He can sing, and his wife was working the register. She was the manager, and I invited him to Texas. We recorded them, and I produced a CD on them, and they're doing real well.
What style of music is that?
R&B.
R&B.
R&B,
okay.
yeah.
And now, do you still, I know you have a band now. You mentioned having a horn section. You have a...
Right.
When you produce your own records, do you still do it on the keyboards, or do you bring in the musicians, or how do you go about doing that?
It varies on the feel. Right now I'm lazy, so I bring in guitar players, I bring in bass players, I bring in horns. My ideas, I don't bring in drummers. I'm sorry, Danny. My drummer's in here. He don't bring in drummers either in his studio, so he can't talk. We use drum machines, and we very sophisticated drum machines that today MPCs and stuff like that. They're called MPC 4000, 5000. These drums sound so well to where you really don't use mics anymore and mic drums down. You can. It's an older remedy, but technology today is so great to where you really don't have to anymore.
Right. Now, is that also a matter of like the sound for radio? I know with a lot of, Southern Soul that they often, you don't hear live horns on the records or live drummers on the records, but when you go and see the shows, it has a little bit different sound.
Yeah, but I've been real blessed to where my musicians have always able to really play my music the way it sounds on the record. Matter of fact, my band plays When You Get Drunk better than I recorded it, I feel, because the energy, it's a little bit more energy there, and it just feels better live.
Okay. Earlier you were talking about Jesus. You have a cross around your neck, and you're playing R&B, singing songs about partying. But I remember, I think I started off the article talking about you at the beginning of the show. You were sort of preaching almost about the pleasures of going out on Saturday nights and the sort of experiences you would have there. And you were talking about just sort of everyday pleasures, not typical things that you hear about in church, but how is that expressed, do you think, in your music that you talked about? Let me see, I had a quote from you. Okay. But it was almost like, you said, I bring up Jesus every night. I sing the blues, but I still have Christ in me. Now, you often are probably dealing with a stereotype that the blues or secular music or R&B is opposed to religion, but you certainly don't seem to think that.
Oh, no. The God that I serve, I can mix Jesus with anything. I don't know of anything in life that you can't. The point that I make each night that I take time out to let my fans know how I made it, and I just pretty much, put it into my show because that's the way I personally feel. And I remember all those struggles. I remember how far I've come, and I know where my blessings came from. That was no great man that did nothing spectacular for me. And when you're there and you're alone and you talk to Christ, alone by yourself, it's important that you let people know what he did for you. Our kids today, they see athletes on TV and they advertise, they show the Nike shoes, they show the Reeboks, this and that. But every once in a while, maybe they should say, I'm in the NBA, but God was good to me. Maybe they should do that once in a while. And we can tone down some of the stereotypes, some of the violence, some of the negativity that we have going on. But it's like we have to be ashamed that we love God. We can't wait for a plane to hit the Trade Center again for us to love each other, So I'm not going to really fake my career. Mm-hmm. That part I'm not going to do. And I know why I've been successful. It's been through him mm-hmm. and the love that my grandmother has instilled in me, because when I began and I was in the choir, at 7 years old, I can remember I was the loudest one up there. Yes, Jesus loved me. Yes, I know, with that big part down the center of my head looking like an expressway. I remember all that. I remember all of that. I remember getting one suit for Easter every year, get fitted at Robert Hall, or go to Robert Hall, you get a suit, you get underwears for Christmas and some new socks. The beginning of the school year, you get 3 pair of jeans, 3 shirts, and some tennis shoes called cross countries with 3 stripes on the side. So if you just can't forget that. Mm-hmm. And I don't care, we all know from what we come from. And we can't be egotistical where we get to a point to where we have $50, mm-hmm. $60 more than what we used to have. I can now go in Red Lobster and eat food that I can't really halfway pronounce, and I can't go into an environment and tell people how good God has been to me. So that's kind of crazy right there, Mm-hmm. And I think if we tone it down and get back to what really needs to transpire in this world.
But so you don't see Saturday night and Sunday morning as in opposition. You tell people things like it's okay to have just because you enjoy a drink now and then doesn't mean you don't love God as well. That there's been this tendency of people thinking that it's bad to go out on Saturday night, but you're reassuring your audience often that it's okay to do this. Don't worry about what people say.
Right, because I worked in nightclubs and I've been in church all my life. But I have to be honest with you, I've met people in nightclubs than better hearts than some people in some churches. So, how does that work? Does it really define just because I go to church, I'm on the usher board, I got a ticket and I'm on my way to heaven? But that's Sunday morning, and then we got 6 more days. Do we turn it off Monday through Saturday, and then Sunday morning we turn into Christ? So I mean, what are we going to really do, you know? But this is something that my grandmother would always smile. She wouldn't talk negative about anyone. She had tons of sister-in-laws, but all them bad sister-in-laws, they loved her because she never got in the middle of gossip and mischievous things. She was just a loving person. But I learned that by my grandmother being a role model as a loving person. It wasn't black, wasn't white. It was just a love. And people would knock on the door and they say, Miss Waiters, can we get a cup of sugar? We weren't rich. She'd give you a cup of sugar. Can we? And then my grandmother had a saying. She would tell me, she says, Melvin, and I would always have kids over, my friends over. She said, if it's not enough to make a syrup sandwich for all the kids out there, then you can't have one. So I think we need to kind of like start giving syrup sandwiches out to one another again in that manner. And if till we get to that point, and that's really what I've come from, Scott, and that's what I mean in that point, because so often I know people, like I'm saying, that friend of mine told me, said, Mel, I'd love to come and see you, Mel, man, I'm proud of you, but I found Jesus. But I looked at him and I said, I know Jesus was lost. So, you know, I found Jesus. I know what he means, but don't just find him on Sunday now. You know, so that's a part of my life. Right. And I'm sorry, it gets bad for me. And Marvin Cease told me right before he passed away, he said, Mel, sound like you trying to preach. No, I'm not trying to preach. This is a testimony of what I've been through, because I remember when it would rain at my grandmother's house, the water would come in through the kitchen because the house had fell. And roaches and rodent, whatever would crawl in. But we had clean clothing, and we ate together at 5 and 5:30 in the afternoon. But when the rain would come in, all she would do was get an oversized bath towel for years and put it down at the door. I mean, we couldn't lift the foundation. You know how much it cost to lift the foundation back then on a house? I mean, but we had love up in there. We really, really had genuine love that I'm able to exhibit, that she gave me out here in the world today. And I just don't want it to be just about my music, because I know she's watching me. And she'd be talking to me. She said, Melvin, did you thank Jesus? So I can't just do a show and not thank Jesus, because she's watching me. So that's pretty much, you know, what I mean when I talk about that, Scott.
Yeah, well, I thought it was beautiful the way you opened the show, and really got the whole call and response thing going.
Last night, yeah, last night, right? Every night. Last night, a lady was up front. Before I got out and went on stage, and Miss Calloway will tell you, we were sitting in a van waiting to perform, and a lady came out, and she was intoxicated. Oh, they holding her up. So my background singer say, I bet you when you go on stage, she gonna come up and shake your hand. She came up and shook my hand. I mean, she was just loaded. But when I got to the part of the show, when I talked about Jesus, she sobered up. She sobered up. She sat up. Oh, she was down front, and she was doing this. She was all. But when I got to the part about Jesus, she sobered up. And then after that, her husband wheeled on out, and they went on home. But it was the thing about when I got to the part of talking about Jesus, how she just mellowed out. It calmed her down. But when I came out, oh, she backed up to me. She did everything. And she had a husband sitting there. I mean, she did everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Right. She squatted and, oh, God. Y'all don't believe me. But trust me, she did it. And I have nights like that when I'm walking to the stage and the ladies, they just grab any part of me that they feel they can. And, you know, so now I know what women feel when they say sexual harassment. I know what that feels like now. So don't be surprised if you see me on the news sitting there talking about I've been sexual harassed. Oh,
Right.
God. But you have to smile because you're artists and they're your fans. But if they got half of their hand in you, what do you do? I mean, but you know, you gotta love it. You gotta be real because everyone vibes off of you, and when you walk into the room, they can feel how genuine you are. You know.
Right. Now you sing about the sort of the sensual pleasures of nightlife, about men and women, about drinking, but you just mentioned somebody a second ago, Marvin Cease, who had entirely took it to a whole different sort of a level.
Yes.
Let's just say that. And a number of other artists on the circuit now also
Right.
sing some pretty dirty songs.
Yeah.
I'll just say Freak for one. I
Yeah.
won't go into the details of what they're singing about, but you don't do that. Why not?
No. I don't have to do that. I mean, if it's like if you get on a pole and come down the pole and you straddle the pole and then you walk outside and you want someone to look at you like you're the superintendent of a school district. What do you, I mean, you are, I mean, I always tell the guys, and one of these guys that does that, I talk to him all the time. I said, man, if you go on stage and you lick your tongue out and people scream, they scream because you lick your tongue out, but that's not talent. Do you get an award for licking your tongue out or grabbing your crotch? I mean, is that a new part of the academy now to where if you grab your testicles or lick your tongue, you get an award? No, that ain't never really been a part of it. So I admire when we're touring right now. I tour, and we're still blessed to tour and have Bobby Bland.
Right.
Bobby's in his late 70s, maybe 80s.
He's 80. He's in his 80s. He turned 80 a year or two
Here's
ago.
a guy that's been doing it for 80 years, still getting paid. Do you think R. Kelly, Neo, or any of those kids, or anybody that does that can do that and be respected at the caliber of Bobby Bland later on in life?
Right.
So,
I guess it's a matter, but then there's Bobby Rush who's still doing it, but Bobby only goes so far. Seems like he does a lot of kind of double meaning, but he doesn't go as far as, say, Marvin Cease and those guys.
Bobby goes. Bobby goes. Bobby goes. He don't go as far, but it's kind of hard to sit there, you and your date, and that much is shaking in front of you. But, I mean, Bobby's known for that much shaking in front of you.
Right.
So,
But he doesn't go to the same levels. At least it seems like his lyrics are a lot more playful.
oh,
in many
his
ways.
lyrics are very,
You know what I mean? He's
yeah,
not just
his-
going. He's not
yeah,
going there.
Yeah,
with
his lyrics are very clean. I mean, the kids can sit in there.
Right.
But I don't know, but visually,
yeah.
the
it's not-
visual part is the part that if you and your husband sitting down front and you like, you be like, well, what do your wife think, you know? So what do you do if you Bobby Rush is there and they're performing and you're sitting there with your wife, I mean, and you're the husband, what do? You look off? I mean, she got to say, oh, I know you want to look. Okay, but anyway, Bobby's my friend and they do a
Right.
great job.
Right. Well, I want to open things up for a couple of questions. We don't have too much time left. Now, does anybody have a question? I'm going to repeat it because this is being filmed. So if you have a question, I'll repeat it and then you can answer it. Yes?
I don't have a question, but my best friend lives in San Antonio here, across the street from, her name is Sandra Michael.
Sandra
And Gerald Michael.
Sandra and Gerald Michael.
Live in your neighborhood.
They do?
I've been talking to her every day, and I told her when you come in town, you know.
Okay. Would you
Two daughters, Shalana and Chanel. They live across the street they're neighbors.
Okay. Did they just move there?
You know, I lived in San Antonio in 1983.
Okay.
I lived there, I was living on a military base, and we both were military.
Okay. What?
Still live there.
Where do they live? Do you know the section of the city? Because I moved.
You moved?
Yeah. Well, if it just it just depends.
I don't have the address. I tried to call before you came out.
Okay.
You told me you were still a neighbor, so.
Okay. Well, that's great. That's great. That's great. Yeah. I just I guess you just really like I do is I'm out on the road every weekend. I don't really get to meet all of my neighbors.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot, so I already got it.
But tell her I would really love to meet them.
All right. Any other questions? Let's see, I got a couple minutes. Let me see, I was going to ask you, how do you think, what's the state of the music business for you now? I know there's been a lot of issues with downloading and also copying, but how are you adapting to the contemporary state of the music business?
I'm doing pretty good because I'm moving units right now. I'm moving them out of my house, and actually, I'm shipping to distributors, and I'm actually seeing that I didn't know you can make money from selling records, until recently. Since I've been on my own, I thought you just record and people make money, but you don't get money from it. I thought it was like, that's a joke. Anyway, but anyway, the state of the music industry right now is a real nightmare. I saw where I read where RCA got rid of Clive Davis. I mean, when you get rid of J Records and these guys that's been in it for years, it's kind of scary to me, So you just wonder where the state of the business is going. But I really appreciate Steve. What's his name from Apple? Steve Jobs. Was it? I really, really appreciate him. I'll tell you why. In my studio, in my HD system, which is Pro Tools, it's an Apple computer there that runs my studio. My iPad, my iPhone, but the nature of the business today has went there, and Steve is a part of all of it. So now, if I want to put a single out, record a record, it costs me $14 to put a single out on iTunes. Wow. And the world can have it within 48 hours, and I'll get paid from it. I kind of think Steve, quite a bit, because back in the day, if you really didn't have a record deal, you didn't stand a chance. So I was really excited when I saw the little boy with the cape on. What was his name? What was his name? Had the record, Soulja Boy. This kid sold 1 million records out of his house, so from iTunes. So it allows you as an artist to become a selling commodity without having to belong,
Does it seem to have stabilized? Because I know over the last decade it was really crazy what was happening, but do you think you're selling sort of a more predictable number of records now?
Oh, no. I went from my years with Malaco to moving 1,800 units a week to a matter of probably a total of 2,500 a month. And I mean, the business had just really, and it's because of a number of things, because I have a real different take on radio today. Radio's not what it used to be. I mean, back in the day, if you were an announcer and you had a radio shift, you would say, here's the latest from Lionel Richie and the Commodores on Magic 102. You're excited. Today, the record can come on and go off. There's no back pre-announce. You don't know whether the person played it is excited. They put no excitement in it. But now we are so modern. And radio says that they're not in the business to sell records. Duh. Mm-hmm. So it's a number of things. I mean, when they deregulated radio and you could curse. I mean, they just do everything on the things they do on the radio today. My program director, when I was in the radio, would have strangled me. As a matter of fact, when I was in the control room, if I see that red hot light come on, that means my PD is calling because I've done something crazy. But today, you hear anything on the radio. They say anything. I mean, not just radio, but television. I mean, it's some things I see, I have to leave if I'm sitting there with my daughter. I mean, what's really the limitations anymore? So, and we wonder why the quality and the business has dropped so. I mean, but when you start sinking to the gutter, then, duh.
So that's not something you're going to start doing?
Nah. I want to be like Bobby Bland.
All right.
I want to be around where people still appreciate my music as I get into my senior years. And I hope and trust in the Lord that I can go out gracefully, because I've seen some real nightmares from people that have been in the business that go out without even able to bury themselves. So I just hope and trust in the Lord I can just go into the sunset, you know, in a respectable manner.
Well, thank you very much for coming out today, and
Thank
we're
you
really
so
looking
much.
forward to seeing you tonight.
What time do I perform?
They'll tell you.
5:45. All
We've
right
got a
then.
couple hours.
All right then.
Well, thank you so much.
I'd love.
Of course.
Yes, I do. Sure. Sure. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much. Thank you, man. Man, and I have this laminated.
You do?
Oh, yes.
I'm going to get mine copied.
Okay.
In a second.
How you doing? Got it?